day 3 or 4, what we decided to do, seeing the handwriting on the wall, was pull in hard. And we did that. I'm only speaking for how the State Theater chose to handle this. We're what is called the Roadhouse. The only show we produce that is our own is the Freddie Award television show. Everything else is a touring company or a small production occasionally that comes on stage. So for us, we stopped programming. We furloughed everyone, frankly, that wasn't attached to fundraising or communication in some way, and began what was really just keeping in touch with the community, keeping in touch with our patrons, fundraising like crazy. As soon as we could get anybody back into the building, we began what I'm sure many other people here began, which was the refund, postpone, and try to calm everybody process. Also fundraising, our sponsors were left up in the air. Everything just stopped, of course. Now, the good news for us thus far has been that our community has been extremely responsive to our plight. They have supported us. Our sponsors stayed with us even through the Freddie Awards, which we sort of scraped through and did a virtual and a sort of a retrospective show, thanks to Channel 69 and their archives. But what we've been doing is fundraising to stay in place so that we can reopen. And the thought that we've now gone all these months without any income, and frankly, it's looking like March at the earliest that we'll be able to start again. And I don't know about that. I mean, that's what we're hoping. So we're in our 3rd round of reschedulings. We have been supported by the county, by the city. Obviously, Representative Wild knows about the Save Our Stages bill that's in front of Congress. We're hoping, fingers and toes crossed, we all are. We're a vast network, everything from the local tavern that has entertainment to the largest arenas. And we've all gathered together, formed a new organization called the National Independent Venue Association. In addition to our normal, groups that we work with, our usual groups, I should say, because nobody's normal in theater. But anyway, we're hanging on. But every week that goes by, as this virus progresses, we don't know how long it's going to be till we can reopen. We certainly can't with the distancing requirements. It just isn't even feasible. And when we do open, we aren't going to do it with any sort of income to our shows. So we're having to project an emergency budget upon another emergency budget to try to figure out how we hang on as we really go back into letting people into the building when that time comes. So I don't know how long I've been talking, Randall, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. The good news is that we've learned that people very much want us back, and they've been enormously supportive everywhere we turn. But what we can't control is how long it's going to be till we can open. And then we know it's going to be quite a while before there's going to be any income after that. And so that's really, and we're just trying to stay in touch and be open and honest about it, and be ready to take whatever comes down the road.
Thank you, Shelley. Susan, did you have a question for
I just
Shelley?
thank you for that that discussion. It really covers a lot of areas that I try not nearly as eloquently to talk about to people who don't understand. They don't understand initially that why the arts are so important in terms of including them in our COVID relief package. A lot of people, the knee-jerk reaction was the arts are a luxury. We're talking about food on the table. And, we really have to talk about the jobs and the economic boost to communities and everything that the arts have provided, separate and apart from the cultural aspects of the arts, but also that it's real people with real jobs who have devoted their lifetimes and their careers to this, so it's not just a luxury item. But you said it, you put it all very nicely. I was taking some notes because I'll incorporate them into my talking points. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to, could I just say one more thing? Two things, actually. I've said for years when I've gone out, and talked to service organizations that there's two businesses that people don't understand: theater and restaurants. Because they magically happen, and we all go to them and enjoy them and think it's all seamless. So again, people are understanding for the first time in a way too dramatic way how narrow the margins are. But to your point about the luxury part, I get that more, of course I understand that, and the economics are hugely important. But the other part that's really important that troubles me greatly through all of this is that the way that people get through hard times is fellowship and being together. And the fact that people gathered, I remember when 9/11 happened and we didn't sell a ticket for weeks. And then the holidays came around and people just rushed to buy tickets and sat in our theater and sat with each other and cried together and laughed together and literally hung on to each other. That's how people are. That's how human beings are. And any of us who've worked in this field, or frankly, anybody who's ever gone to a great show and sat there and blubbered and talked to the stranger next to them, or laughed with someone, or walked out on the street afterward and had a conversation with a total stranger, understands that people go to theater. Some people go as a luxury because they have the money and they like theater. Other people go to escape pain or sadness or loneliness, and they find that in theater and in the arts. And that's sometimes a tough thing for people to understand, that that's as important as money. And
that's nourishment, and that's soul food, that's for sure.
You're right, Shelley. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a great perspective, and it helps me a lot in being able to frame this issue for folks. So thanks.
Thank you.
Kara Mohsinger served as the CFO at the National Museum of Industrial History for about a year and a half before she assumed the position of president and CEO. With an MA from American University and working toward her MBA at Lehigh University, Kara possesses extensive experience in as a financial professional in the nonprofit arena. She's very active in the arts community and works with the Lehigh Valley Passport to History Consortium and the Museum and Library Alliance of the Greater Lehigh Valley. I'm interested in your perspective on the pandemic. How is it affecting the business of the museum and exhibition business?
So to follow up from Shelley's comments, I was actually going to talk about a little bit of money. So my background working mostly with numbers, I will talk about our budget and how it has affected our budget, but I also want to talk about how it's affected our relationship with the schools. Going into March, we actually had a very bright future. For those of you that don't know, we opened up in August of 2016. So working for a nonprofit, as you all know, has its own struggles, but working for a startup nonprofit has its own special spice to it. So going into March of this year, we were actually looking at a very positive year. And then all of a sudden, March 13 happened, closed our doors for 3.5 months. And as you know, 3.5 months of zero earned income is just 3.5 months of zero income, but it's more than that. There was, aside from just people not buying tickets or purchasing things in our gift shop, or canceled events or postponed programs and exhibits, there was lost revenue from contributed revenue, our annual gala. Just the lasting effects just on our budget alone turned out to be about 30% of lost revenue. And for a small nonprofit with a small budget, that's a large amount. I have to say that with the help of legislation and legislators like Congresswoman Wild, we were fortunate enough to plug that gap, 26%, with the PPP and the EIDL loans, and with some additional funding or some operational spending cuts, we actually are going to finish the year break even, which is great news. But our fear is going into 2021 when we're not sure if there's going to be a second stimulus package. And with the numbers rising again with the COVID rates, we're just not sure when we're going to have business back to usual. When we did reopen, we reopened at limited capacity. Our numbers right now are about a third of where we're at last year. The visitation numbers, we're looking at about half of where we're at last year. And probably preaching to the choir on this, but a lot of people probably think that a nonprofit, they get their funding from the federal government. And I still hear this every day when I'm at the museum. People come in, they see the Smithsonian logo on our door because we are a Smithsonian affiliate. People are surprised that they have to open up their wallet and pay to come in. They think that we're Smithsonian affiliate and we're a free museum, and that's where we get our funding. We get zero funding from the Smithsonian, zero from federal government. In fact, any government grants that we get make up about 3 to 6% of our annual budget every year. And most of our funding comes from local or regional, either contributed or earned income. So we do rely on our communities to be able to make up and keep the museum afloat. So this year it hit us hard. So without that emergency relief funding, I honestly don't know where we would be at this year. And I'm sure some of you have seen some of the studies that as a result of the pandemic, they think that 1/3 of museums across the US will permanently close their doors. So as I said, when it comes to school tours, that statement alone, I think the long-lasting effects, the irreversible damage that's going to be done is going to be seeing the gap in education. NMIH alone would bring in 3,000 students in a given year and educate them. One story that really honestly touches my heart is that in 2019, we had a woman call. She was a mother and also the head of the PTA for the Stroudsburg Middle School. And she said that for the past, I want to say maybe 10, 12 years, that school did not have any school trips because they just did not have the funding. And for the last couple of years as the head of the PTA, she had been working hard to raise funds and they had enough money. And she just Googled STEM field trips and our name came up. And so she wanted to check it out. And so she realized we were in range and she wanted to, come down and see it. So they actually had enough money, but I also put out a call to manufacturing companies in her area. And we received a grant for them. So they were able to use the money and add an additional tour for them to do a walking tour of the site as well. So they had their entire 7th grade come down, which was about 800 kids, come down to the museum and do their school field trip. And they liked it so much that they were going to come back in 2020. We were able to get about half of them in before we had to close down in March. We also welcome the 5th grade of Bethlehem area school districts every year. Allentown school districts, if they have the funding for the buses, that depends. And then one-off schools that we welcome. So 3,000 mostly for this year, we're not allowed to come in because of the pandemic. And again, in 2021, no on-site tours are going to happen. So for me, a mother of 3 and seeing what it's like in a hybrid model and the gaps in learning that's happening there, when you're not sending kids out to these actual site programs and being able to feel and touch and experience these things, that's really what worries me. So again, I want to thank Congresswoman Wild for the work that you've done to support the arts. It is important, and I definitely feel that in the Valley. I think since I moved here, I feel that it is a true community. And as Shelley said, the silver lining in all of this is that I did feel that once this hit, we all got together. A lot of the museums and historical sites came together on a lot of calls to work together to get mutual grants, figure out how we were going to get through this together. But there's more that needs to get done to get us through the next year as well.
Thank you, Kara. Susan, do you have a question for Kara?
No, thank you, though. It really reinforces a lot. Appreciate it.
Traveling over to Allentown, I'd like to introduce Shannon Fugate, Executive Director from the Baum School of Art. She's been the Executive Director for over 10 years and having amassed a 20-year career in community visual art education in Pennsylvania. Shannon, would you speak to the challenges that you're facing and for representing an art school as well as an organization that has a very full exhibition schedule throughout the year?
Sure. So the Baum School closed March 11th. During the pandemic, it became increasingly apparent to us that holding in-person classes was going to be unsafe to do. So that was about 3.5 weeks into our spring session. We lost our post session as well and our summer adult session. We were able to reopen in July for limited in-person summer camps. The Baum School has programs for all ages. So we start at age 5 through adults. And we also have a partnership with Lehigh Carbon Community College for credit students. So we were able to, during the shutdown period, create some virtual programming and stay connected in that way. But a lot of our time was focused on trying to understand the guidance for in-person instruction, how we would go about returning to our building and welcoming students back into our building. So we really took a phased approach to overhauling just really the entire building, moving desks, moving furniture. In art classes, we cannot, because of virus mitigation efforts, share art supplies. So how to rearrange or establish what we needed to work with children in that way. Which means building individual kits for every student, which also, increases your costs when you used to have a classroom bucket of brushes. Now you've got to have individualized supplies for every student. We lost quite a lot of revenue in terms of earned revenue. I would say, at the Baum School, we're about 60% earned revenue. So the hits to tuition were very difficult. And in the summer, we had just a fraction. I mean, I'm not even sure if we had 10% of what we would normally have in a summer camp. One of the things I think that breaks my heart about that more than anything is that the scale of our programs also kind of dictates the scale of our outreach. So how many free programs can we provide to the community? What can we offer to Allentown kids who have really limited arts education opportunities? So not that we didn't offer scholarships and financial aid, but our city arts partnership, I see some city arts partners on the call on the Zoom today too. Our program was canceled. That was for 80 Rob students, a multi-arts program in art, theater, music, and dance. So you just look at the financial impacts are one thing, but just the lack of connection to our community has been just such a huge scale. So we're just trying to do what we can do to be resilient. We enjoyed working with Congresswoman Wild on our artistic discovery competition. We hosted that virtually. We hosted our annual art auction virtually, which was our silver lining. That event actually ended up being more successful than our in-person event, which was just mind-blowing. So that was a fun success or a bright spot in all of this. But, we have so much research out there about making art and what that does for our sense of well-being. And interestingly, according to our Google Trends data, US searches for words like positivity, self-care, baking, and painting had an all-time high in April. So people were looking for these outlets, but we couldn't provide them. So, our focus was really, how do we get this is going to be a long haul. How do we get our building in order for hosting classes? So Where we could once host 18 students in a room, we can host 9. Where we could have 16 students in a ceramics classroom, we could host 8. So that involved just a lot of manual labor to get our studios in shape to where we could begin to offer programs. And then once we did, of course, tuition, your net profit is on having a full class, right? You have a minimum number for the class to run, and anything over and above your minimum is really what profit you make, right? Falsehood that nonprofits don't need to make a bit of a profit. We have capital needs, we have all of those kinds of things. So we operated a fall session. We welcomed adults back into the building and our youth students, but the cleaning protocols prevented us too from using our facility to full capacity. So that's another issue on top of being closed for all of that time. Now we, in days of the past, pre-COVID, you could see a class start from 9 to noon, another one run from 12:30 to 3:30, another one pop in at 4 to 6, and then the adults come in at 4:30 to 6:30. So now we have to take time to sanitize everything. So our arts administration staff also became expert sanitizers because we've all taken on, we didn't expand our staff when we opened because we don't have an income to do that. So, we'd run around, write a grant, disinfect a doorknob, and on we go for the fall. And we were able to operate with strict mitigation procedures in place and not have any confirmed cases in our building during that time, which we're really glad for. So we were able to have people back, people adjusted to the rules, we had mask wearing, we were still able to give scholarships and do some of our outreach. We haven't been nearly able to return to the scale we were at, both in tuition programs and our community outreach. But the scary part is that we've had to push the pause button a second time. So we were set to start classes for a winter term last week. And we have a virus mitigation committee on our board that's comprised of we have a pretty amazing board with a medical doctor, a sanitation expert, legal team. We've got the works and we looked at the numbers and the increasing cases and just said, we have to, whether or not the government makes a choice for us, we're going to make the choice because we have to prioritize the safety of our community over just running classes. So we've postponed our winter term until 2 weeks after the New Year's holiday, and then we're going to reevaluate. So it's a snowballing issue in terms of finances. Luckily, the Baum School was in a very strong financial position going into the pandemic. We had made some very conservative choices over the last few years to make sure that we had financial stability reserves, those kinds of things. We were able to access PPP, which was very helpful. We were able to access some county relief funds. Other than that, most of our support has been private from the community. One thing I wanted to mention too, if we're talking about, especially since we're talking to Congresswoman Wild, is that NEA support is not that easy to access. We did get some pass through Pennsylvania Council on the Arts through the state, but also an organization like the Baum School doesn't qualify for grants like the Preserving Cultural Heritage that happened through, that was released through the Harrisburg. So we don't fit the description. So there are a lot of arts organizations, I think, that don't fit exactly neatly into the boxes that federal aid will allow you to be eligible for. So we've had to be really creative, but I would say largely fundraising has come from the private community, with the PPP being the largest amount of aid that we had gotten. We're okay right now, but if we continue these, stops and starts, it's going to be difficult, one, to maintain staff, especially of teaching artists who teach on a part-time basis. It's going to be hard to maintain a team. We've got physical plant operations to keep going, the service contracts don't stop, the building utilities don't stop, those things don't stop just because we can't let people into the building. So, you know, it's not so much the shutdown that is the only problem. It's these lasting effects and how do we get through recovery? And that's going to be, I think, multi-year process. So, and also maintaining safety in our facilities. So when students come back in, are we able to keep them safe? Our galleries haven't been operating essentially. We have right now we have our holiday gift gallery, which is one of the first physical shows that we've done in a while, but we haven't been able to offer exhibition opportunities. There are a lot of artists that rely on sales of their work, and a lot of those venues in the community aren't able to operate. We're not having receptions. We're not having those events where you would be making sales for artists. So those are some other, you know, visual arts kind of specific issues. And same with the other arts venues, galas, events, those sorts of things have not happened. We've been lucky enough to say, you know, to our donors, we're not having a gala, would you sponsor us anyway? And they've agreed. So that's been wonderful. But I'm looking at the numbers kind of mounting as we continue through this mess and the sort of cuts that we have to make and the sacrifices that we have to make for the sake of safety, which have to be done, and say, okay, well, how long can we do that? How long can we realistically do that? And how long can we do that and not have an uphill battle to climb in terms of marketing too? So, you know, for the Baum School, people come to the school, take classes, they grow up with us. They take classes in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. Our adult classes, we have people that have taken classes with us for 40 years. So building that retention, we're going to be starting from scratch again too. So that's that's about it in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Shannon. I think one of the themes from all the presenters has been the relationship you have with your community, with your patrons, has made a difference throughout this ordeal. I'm sure there are a lot of questions that have popped into people's mind, but before we open it up to the general audience, I did want to ask these questions that were submitted by a few people. For Susan, what is the status or the likelihood in Washington for COVID relief funding? Is it going to happen? And is a second PPP likely?
Well, is it going to happen? You know, I've gone back and forth on that over the last week. I still believe that there is that we have the potential for doing it. But it's been a very frustratingly slow process. I don't have to tell all of you that. And I'm not going to make a firm prediction about whether we're going to get another package. I do believe we'll get another package. The question becomes, what will it include and what will it leave on the cutting room floor? That's really my concern. And there is, you know, that's a significantly greater concern for me, is how much will be cut out of it than will we get one done at all. I think we'll get one done. The question is going to be cut. And whatever it is, I will tell you that I and many others will feel compelled to vote for it, even if it leaves out significant things that we feel are vital, because we've come to the conclusion that helping some is preferable to helping none. Having said that, you know, over the course of the last 6 months, the strategy has been to hold out for what we felt was needed in a very, you know, in a broad base. And by the way, it's not just what we as politicians think, but it's also what economists generally have been telling us is necessary, that we need to spend, that we need to borrow, and that we need to make sure that the foundation of this country, or the economic foundation of this country, is supported until we can get back to the foundation building upon itself, because we've been able to reopen things and we've got vaccinations and that kind of thing. So having said that, I think that we're going to see something, but I'm not going to make you any promises about whether there will be money in there for the arts. You know, right now, it looks like we're working on a $900 billion bipartisan proposal that several senators have shown a willingness to work on. We have not yet gotten that from Senator McConnell. So again, this could be held up. And, you know, I can't be any more certain than that. I wish I could be. I have been pushing all along. And this is why I said when Shelley was speaking that it helps me to have the talking points from all of you, because you know, it's really important. As we live in a district, but District 7 in Pennsylvania, like many districts, the foundation of our recreational life is the arts and restaurants. You mentioned restaurants, Shelley, and truly, it's crushing that the two industries that provide the backbone of our recreational life, and I use recreational loosely, it's also our cultural life and everything else, are the two industries that have probably been hit the hardest by this. And so you probably know that I was an early co-sponsor of the Restaurants Act. I'd love to see something like that that's directly focused on the arts as well. So I'm working hard on trying to make sure that we have arts funding in whatever we pass. I will tell you that the updated HEROES Act, the second one, which I did vote for, I did not vote for the very first HEROES Act because of a number of problems with it that I thought, but we passed it on October 1st, and it has $10 billion in funding for live event venues. And it was in that context that we got a number of people gave pushback saying, you know, why are we trying to save our stages when people are trying to eat, you know, and that the two are not mutually exclusive in my view. So, and in fact, on the Save Our Stages Act, let me just, I want to, you know, that's HR 7806. I'm a co-sponsor of that. And it's actually bipartisan and has 171 co-sponsors. And it also has companion legislation in the Senate, which is also bipartisan. So that's really good. Do I think that'll happen between now and the end of the year? No. I mean, I'm just being realistic. I don't see that, but I do feel as though that's something that we're going to see at some point because it's got so much support from people across both sides of the aisle. And what that bill would do would actually appropriate $10 billion, as I said, in grants to live venue operators, producers, promoters, talent representatives, and so forth. So I'm hopeful that we're eventually going to see that. I don't think we're going to see it as part of the next COVID relief package, whatever that may look like. You asked me also, Randall, about the Paycheck Protection Program. I do think there's a very strong chance that additional PPP funding will be included. Everybody seems to understand the need for it. And that, again, that's a very bipartisan feeling. Interestingly, what I've been hearing mostly from small businesses and people at nonprofits and so forth who could take advantage of a second PPP round is that they don't need another loan, because that just adds yet another column or another entry into their payables. And what they really need is grants in the form of PPP. So I know that there's a second PPP bill that I co-introduced with John Curtis, a Republican from Utah, that actually I think is an enhanced and better version of PPP. It makes it much more flexible, much more forgivable. And the flexibility particularly goes to what you can spend the money on. It's not as narrow as the first PPP was. So I think that we're going to see PPP, you know, and I think there's even a decent chance that we're going to see it before the end of the year. What I want to see is something that is not just relief in name only, but is actually geared to nonprofits like yours and small businesses that don't just need one more thing to deal with going forward. By the way, the enhanced PPP program also has much easier application process associated with it, because I know the first one was a nightmare. So I hope that's an answer. It's a bit of a non-answer because I unfortunately don't get to control everything here.
Before you, if you would mind answering this question, what advice can you give us to influence the priorities and the agenda in Washington? What can we do?
Well, let me just say this. Number one, what you're doing right now is really helpful. I always say that, and this is true for every member of Congress, we come here with whatever our various areas of expertise are, but none of us are, know everything about everything, even though some politicians like to think that they do. And so what I consider to be advocacy is exactly what you're doing. You're educating your lawmakers about your particular industry. I'm sorry, I keep calling it an industry, but it's the easiest. I think it is an industry. You're educating us and you're advocating for yourselves and your employees and your clients and customers and so forth. So first of all, don't ever stop doing this. And I hope that you will share that with your colleagues in the arts across the country, that they all need to be organizing this kind of thing with their lawmakers, because it's the only, we have a lot of competing demands from our constituents and from folks all over the place, especially now during COVID. The only way we think about what your issues are is if you bring them to our attention, because there's a lot of noise, and most of the noise is justified noise right now, by the way, but there's a lot of noise. And so you have to stay very proactive. That's number one. Number two, that's what you need to do with your lawmakers. But number two, what I'd like to encourage you all to do is to try to change the public perception with some of, whether it's letters to the editor, articles, public talks, whatever, just so that people stop viewing the arts as something that's frivolous, something that we don't need to be supporting, whether it's in education. As a member of the House Education and Labor Committee, I can tell you that, and you know that, Shannon, for sure, at the Baum School, but money for arts education, it gets reduced
Sure.
almost every single year. But it's also just about, in general, Shelley, you were so articulate on the issue of, the mental health aspects of it, the coming together after 9/11. I think that was was that Kara who mentioned that? But, that we're going into one of the deepest, darkest winters that we've ever experienced. And we're going to need to rejoice and celebrate and commune with our friends when we get to the other side of this. And if we don't have places to go to do that, it will make it that much harder. So being able to go to a show, being able to have a nice dinner out, being able to, again, go to a gala at the Baum School, that kind of thing. I mean, it's a significant part of our structure in the Lehigh Valley as well as across this country. So I would really urge you, and I know it's very difficult to market because you don't have any budget for marketing right now. So I'm not suggesting marketing in the classic sense. I'm suggesting more in the old, the public specter, again, letters to the editor, talking about it, discounting it on social media, people who claim that it's frivolous and not necessary. It's a true necessity in my view. And so that's the other thing, and the reason I think it's so important to do it with the public is because it assists us as lawmakers. It's very hard to carry the torch for an area, for a particular group or groups when the public doesn't see or value the importance of it. So it's a two-part thing. I'm certainly keenly aware of it, but you can help me advocate for all of you when I don't get pushback, and far more than pushback, from people who don't understand it.
Thank you, Susan. And do you have time for us to open up to the audience?
Sure, I think I have 12 minutes until they call votes.
Is there a question out there for Susan or for one of the panelists? I was struck by the idea when you called it an industry, and I think it's a good thing to call it an industry because the community, the culture needs to recognize the value of it. I mean, we as a nation give money to farmers not to plant crops. I mean, why can't they give resources to empty seats, to some of these venues would have empty seats. And then they can turn around and donate some of those seats to the public in need. I mean, there's ways of addressing these concerns in various ways that we could probably start thinking outside the box and making people be aware of the fact just how important the arts are. Do the venue, all of the three panelists have venues. Is there any specific program that exists for PPE supplies and funding? I mean, that's got to, stress your budget out even more in order to supply those things.
We were able to get care support through the county to cover our additional expenses related to virus mitigation. So that was one area where we were able to get some support. So in terms of, additional sanitizer, masks, we had to actually purchase at the Baum School. When you come for art class, you just chuck your backpack and your coat on a table and run in and go paint. And now, all of those things have to be safely separate. So we had to purchase lockers for people to put their coats. We had to buy plexiglass screens, all of those kinds of things. So we were able to get some help for that. But it is an ongoing expense. And for us, the bigger expense really is those individualized supplies. So that's definitely, definitely an added cost. I mean, we had to really renovate a lot of our spaces, so.
Do the arts venues have liability issues, which has become a concern about covering liability as it relates to the pandemic?
I've sat through a number of calls since none of us are open, none of the performing arts venues are open, but the questions about, what if people sue us because they say they got COVID in venue, all that kind of stuff. And so we've been sitting through lots and lots of sessions with attorneys, and Congresswoman Wild, I'm sure, knows all about all of this, and we've been getting all kinds of differing advice. But frankly, it's a lot of talk about something that hasn't started to happen yet. Right. And so, it's a lot of speculating about things. But we're just sitting idle, waiting. And our building is on the National Register of Historic Places. So we're trying to take care of it while we're going through all of this and doing our best with that. But as far as liability, Randall, people ask a lot of questions about that. But to this point, a lot of it is speculative. And some of the early contracts I've seen, everybody's trying so hard to protect themselves from anything that nothing's going to get done. So something's going to end up happening as we actually start to go back to work. By the way, Patrick, I think, has been trying to get your attention, Randall. Either that was waving at me.
Do you have a question?
An observation, actually. Thank you, Congressman Wild. So appreciate this. And if you're looking for more talking points, first, I just want to express our gratitude for the block grants that did come through the CARES package, the not-for-profit, the tourism, the cultural, et cetera. I honestly don't know what conversation we would be in internally without that. At Pennsylvania Shakespeare Festival, we weren't eligible for PPP. So that was absolutely a lifeline. If folks are wondering if the arts are important, just ask them how much Netflix they've been watching since the pandemic started, right? If anything tells us how important this is, it's our tethering to those experiences. I heard a psychologist at one point talk about there are 5 fundamental human needs, all right? And some of them will resonate really naturally in Congress, like safety and freedom and power, the ability to have an impact in the world. And the other 2 are belonging, which has already been talked about, and fun. These are fundamental human needs. They're not things we can go without some serious consequences. And those consequences are making themselves known too. And by belonging, you know, we're in the beauty business, and people say, I'm in beauty with a capital B, the kind of beauty that philosophers talk about. And this is an important thing to human beings. I don't recommend talking about that on the floor of the House. I don't think it'll go very far. But we need to know that beauty and belonging go hand in hand, that when we have an experience of something exquisite and beautiful, we have a sense that everything fits, that we belong, that somehow things are in balance. And every now and then in life, we need that. And also just want to note, of course, that, you know, this has had such a devastating impact, not only on these companies, but on the artists who have spent all of their training dollars in their lives on becoming the fine artists that they are. They've devoted their lives to this work in a very fragile field on its best day. I mean, a conversation for another day is how these business models that we're all working with just don't work, and that government support probably has to be a part of that. I mean, the NEA budget would buy half an F-22. I believe in F-22s, but half an F-22 is the NEA budget right now. So, and the artists can't even sustain themselves the way they normally would, with restaurant work, with work in catering, work in offices. None of that's happening right now. So they are just devastated. Thank
Hi,
you.
Congresswoman. Sorry to interrupt. You're going to be needed on the House floor in just a second to vote. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. I'm also going to be dropping in the chat the email of one of my colleagues, Julia, who handles this issue area. So if you guys have any follow-up questions or anything like that, go ahead and send your questions to her, and she can pass along to the Congresswoman, and we can get back to you.
Okay, so, I've got like 5 minutes, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple minutes.
Okay, so Patrick, what you just said about half of an F-22 is very appropriate, because here we are. When I head to the House floor, we're voting on the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act. And one of I will be voting for it because there are many good provisions in it. And I'm not about to deprive our troops of a pay raise. Having said that, it causes me considerable consternation to be spending what we are spending on our defense budget at a time when, you know, people's food benefits are running out and their unemployment is running out, and we're not providing funding of this sort that we're talking about here. So, you know, the fact of the matter is that we can do this, and we must do this. I really believe that. I really believe that it is that, you know, that the arts are part of the heart and soul of who we are. It means something different to everybody. And, you know, I have 2 kids, adult kids who literally grew up at the Baum School. I've got my daughter's closest friend was in the Freddie Awards one year, and we all went and watched it, you know, and it was just so wonderful, you know, multiple families coming together because this one girl was a big part of the Freddies, you know, and it was just, that's community building. It's not just about, well, I'm not even gonna say just about, it's more than what we typically think of the arts. It is everything that you all have identified here today. It's the sense of community, the sense of belonging, the need for beauty and fun. And it's people's lives, the artists, as you've identified, you know, that really have been just devastated by this. So please consider me to be an ally. I do want to continue to hear from you. I would also encourage you to share with your cohorts on the national level, for lawmakers who aren't receptive to doing this kind of call, and they should never give up and not at least do, you know, correspondence and that kind of thing I prefer personally to see people face to face and hear from them. And I think a lot of my colleagues feel the same way. As much as we might all hate Zoom right now, I think we're also really grateful for having Zoom, because God forbid if we were just trying to do this all by telephone these days. But I think that you all are such an important part of the fabric of our community of Pennsylvania 7, but you're also really, really good advocates for just a critical industry, and something that I firmly believe in. So thank you for everything that you've shared with me. I'd love to keep having these dialogues. Hopefully one of these days we're going to go back to having galas, and I'll see you all at the, I promise to come to every gala that is held once we start doing it. I mean, honestly, sometimes in this line of work, you sometimes feel like, oh no, not another gala. I've been to one every night this week. I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to getting back to doing those kinds of things, and going to openings and that kind of thing. So I hope to see all of you in the not too distant future. I do hope you'll also all advocate for the vaccinations that are coming. I think one of the best things that we can do to get ourselves reopened and back in the normal swing of things is to get as many people vaccinated as possible. And I plan to be very public about it when I finally get a vaccination. And I hope that many of you will consider doing the same, because we're going to need widespread acceptance of it. So
Thank you, Susan.
if anybody has anything else they wanted to say before I have to hop off in the next minute, I'm all ears.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for this
you.
opportunity.
Thank you. Really
Thank
great
you.
seeing you all.
And thank you to all my
Although I will
members.
say it has made me wistful. Seeing your faces and knowing the organizations that you represent just makes me wistful, because it's been such a long time since I've stepped foot inside them. But we will return.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all for serving on the panel.
And have a great holiday season. I really,
too.
let's all count the blessings that we do have. Recognize that it will be different, but recognize also that we have blessings, and that next year will look different. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll sign off. Thank you,
night,
Dana.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Randall.